And we are live. Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Nature Through Your Eyes Hangout show. This is going to become a regular show. We had to take a break for a bit due to some technical difficulties, I guess I'll say. But I just wanted to welcome everybody to the show and everybody who is viewing live right now. And then right now what we'll do is we will go through introductions with our guests. And first up on our left we have Athena Carey, so if you want to give us your introduction.
Okay. Sorry, I've been awake for 20 minutes and it's the middle of the night. I'm Athena. I'm based out of Switzerland for right now. Relatively new to landscape photography. My background is in portraits. I'm on Google+. I'm also on athenacarey.com.
Excellent. And over to Ben.
My name is Ben Horn. I'm from San Diego, California, and I'm probably one of the few. I don't know. I guess I don't like my back and everything, so actually I do all film photography these days, and that right there is what I've been using since 2009. So
Wowzer.
All landscape photography and all large format stuff right now.
Excellent. And I guess I'm next. My name is Jim Davis. I'm a photographer out of Ontario, Canada. And I came from film. And I guess 2003 I switched over, not completely, but I switched into digital and slowly made my way through to the point where I actually stopped shooting film. But then I recently returned to it. So that's part of what our topic is going to be tonight. So from there we will move over to Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen Nelson, and I'm a graphic designer, and I live currently in British Columbia, Canada, but I'm actually German. So. And photography is a hobby for me.
Excellent. And over to Peyton.
My name is Peyton Hale. I'm based in North Carolina. I guess you could say I'm a moonlight as a landscape photographer. I'm actually a natural science curator here, maybe transitioning from one to the other at some point full time. And I've been shooting since about 2006. I picked up a film camera when I was doing my undergrad research and kind of started to take it more seriously 2008 and have taught myself everything I've been learning along the way.
And next we're over to Ron.
Hi, I'm Ron Clifford. I'm primarily a digital photographer. Most of my work and my life lately is here on Google+. I participate in a mentorship program and a couple of shows here, and I'm really glad to be back with Nature Through Your Eyes.
Excellent. So we do have one guest that we're trying to get in, who is Dave from F-Stop Gear. I'm hoping that he got the invite. I sent it to two of his profiles. But from here on, we'll just move forward until he hopefully jumps in with us. So a brief outline of the topics that we're going to be covering. The first topic will be film versus digital, and not what you think. And there's a reason why it's not what you think. But the next topic, if Dave pops in, we're going to talk about F-Stop Gear and the company. If Dave doesn't, then it's going to be up to myself, Peyton, and Ben to hold the flag for F-Stop. Then we will go into a photographer highlight, which will highlight Karen, Peyton, Athena, and Ben and their photography. They each have images selected that they're going to be showing us and talking about. And then we'll do some closing thoughts. Next show coming up. And then hopefully after this we'll have an after show, just more of a casual get-together. Ron, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you got it pretty much covered there. You just carry on. What I'm going to be doing for much of the show is keeping an eye on the chat, so if you talk to me and I don't respond right away, it's because I've muted myself. I'll get to you.
All right. So yeah, just for everybody that's watching live, if you want to have any questions answered, you can put it in, go to my live stream, and under the Hangout window, there's a comment section there. You can put your comments in there, and hopefully we can get to everybody's questions. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to talk about the film versus digital. And there's a reason why that I brought this up, and that's because Ron and I were on a trip a couple of weeks ago up in Tobermory, and I had a bit of an accident where I slipped on some ice and my D3X fell in the water.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had sold my other body with anticipation of the D800, so I wanted to sell it before the other cameras came out. That way I wouldn't lose as much money on it. So I was left without a digital body. Now, luckily, for some reason, I decided to bring my Hasselblad up and a few rolls of film. So for me, it was kind of, I was forced back into rethinking how I was shooting, because I set the Hasselblad up, I loaded the film, and I had to actually pause and think, okay, I really have to think about this before I start making my exposures, because number one, I had limited amount of film, and it's just one thing where you can't check the back of your camera for you know, to look on your screen, your LCD screen, to confirm that you've got your exposure correct and things like that. So for me, it was kind of an eye-opener that there really is a difference between film versus digital, and it's not a discussion on which one is better, it's just the approach. Ron, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, this weekend, I don't shoot film anymore. I've been really embracing the ability to check my images as I shoot to get my exposures right. I did grow up on things like the zone system and doing darkroom experiments to make sure I understood how to not blow my highlights or to block out my shadows. But this weekend that passed, that Jim and I were there, I kind of felt like the Energizer Bunny running around taking thousands of pictures while he was working a craft, what I think is almost a forgotten art of capturing an image. And what a contrast. It was real different mind space for me to see this happen.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, because I do have a meter on my Hasselblad, but I'm not confident in its ability to give me the correct exposure. So I really had to kind of dig deep into my recesses of my brain to come up with some of the questions that I had and how I was going to approach getting the correct exposure. I had one roll of color film, which was Velvia transparency film, and then I had a few rolls of black and white, and they were all different ISOs, so I really had to be very careful. So next I wanted to talk to Ben, because I've been following Ben for a few years, and I really appreciate the fact that he's set digital down and gone back to not only film, but gone back to large format, which is really something these days of our need to have instant feedback all the time. To go that far back and really learn the craft, I find it very interesting. So if you wanted to kind of just talk to us a little bit about maybe why and how you approach your photography.
Well, I'd say the first thing, the reason I kind of decided to try large format was because I was doing some stitching with digital and taking a bunch of pictures and putting them together, and though initially it was all about trying to get a certain degree of quality, I actually found it easier to work with film. And I had a 1DS3, which was and still is a great camera. I had a bunch of lenses, and I found that if I was sitting there trying to take a shot by stitching a bunch of photos together, it took a lot of time to do that. And so a friend of mine suggested, just get a 4x5 camera. So I tried that out and ended up really liking it so much I sold off everything digital, and that was in 2009. And what initially attracted me to large format was the quality. But in retrospect, it's not necessarily the quality, it's just kind of like you're talking about. It's the way you work with it, where you have to try to make everything count. And there was times when I'll literally have 1 or 2 sheets of film with me that day, and when you're spending $20 for every sheet of film on 8x10, you think a little bit about before you take the shot. And I guess the other thing too is that it is a very, very limiting camera to work with. There's so many different things I can't shoot that instead I focus on what I can shoot, and that kind of helps shape my vision. So I have this image in my mind that I kind of go after and I try to get. And one of the things, for example, I like to shoot a lot in the morning, and I know I've mentioned this a lot in my blog, but I can't set my camera up in the morning. So I have to set it up the night before, leave it out overnight, then come back the next day and take the shot. So it also kind of forces me to get up early and all that other fun stuff that we love doing as landscape photographers. So it's a mentality of working with the camera. Of course, the quality is nice, but it makes it so it forces me to wait until the light really is very good and try to find the conditions that are just the most ideal for it. And when everything aligns, it works out really well. But there's times when it doesn't too.
So in a typical day, how many images would you take with your large format camera?
If my goal is to take one shot a day, and this is a large number of shots. If I can take one shot every day, I'm in pretty good shape, but there's times when I go without shooting. My most recent trip to Death Valley, it was very windy on several days, and I simply can't shoot if there's anything more than a breeze. So yeah, I kind of wait around for the light to be good. Spend time scouting around. I think the most shots I've taken in one day is 4 or 5, and that's just because the light was changing really fast, and I didn't think I metered it right, so I burned through like $100 worth of film. So that's never fun. Yeah.
So the whole approach to, whereas like for myself, when I go out on trips and that, I will always have my camera out when I'm walking or hiking to wherever I'm going, and if I see something, I'll stop. I'll grab a few shots. If I think that it's really good, I will maybe spend a little bit more time, work on the composition, maybe wait for some good lighting. But I always have the ability to shoot, where on your with shooting 8x10 format, you don't have that ability to kind of
no.
You really have to
it's all very well planned.
Yeah.
It's if I'm walking along and I see like this amazing cloud formation that I want to try to shoot, I really can't get the camera set up fast enough to shoot it. I like, in a perfect world, to have about an hour to set up the camera. And the fastest I've set it up to take a shot was about 15 minutes. And that was just like, I didn't even want to look at the subject. It was just trying to get everything up and running. It's kind of like you ignore it. You just kind of like, I don't see what's going on here. I'm setting my camera up. But that was one of the Death Valley shots I took a couple of years ago. But I like to sit there for about an hour and get everything everything good, and just wait for the light to be good. So it's kind of weird to say that you plan to shoot a landscape where you got clouds and stuff, but a lot of times I'll set up the camera, I'll hope that there's clouds, and then they'll show up. So you have to kind of get to know the location pretty well too.
Yeah. I know, like for myself, if I'm shooting, say I'm shooting a sunset, there's always, obviously good light at the sunset, but if you turn around, there's always something going on behind you as well, and you just don't have that option, right?
No. Yeah. No, definitely not at all. It's, and as like I was saying, if I'm going to be setting up a sunset shot, I concentrate most on, finding an awesome foreground and making sure that my composition is really solid. And I just kind of wait for the clouds to drift into my photo. And it's kind of a weird wait-and-see approach. And there are many shots that I miss in the process, but I've learned to kind of accept that there's many things I can't shoot. And so if I kind of pull all my resources into trying to get the shot that does turn out, that's usually how I've been successful.
Yeah. I got a couple of questions from the chat room about your process. Zach Stein wants to know, do you ever carry a digital camera with you in addition to your large format?
The only digital I own is a point and shoot.
Okay.
So I don't even have a digital SLR anymore.
Very
by using the external meter, the spot meter, that can tell me all I need to know about my exposure. So, but not anymore. Don't even have one.
So I have a question for Athena. You used to shoot film, and you now shoot digital. Would you ever think about going back to film?
Not right now. I think I'm a little bit too ADD for film. But my recent sort of foray into long exposure photography, a lot of the stuff that Ben said I can relate to, because it also really, really slows you down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've noticed is it puts you in a different mindset when you're shooting. I find sometimes with digital, you almost get into it's almost like an addiction or a drug that you got to constantly clicking that shutter. And I know when shooting at some of the places where they're very popular, say Mesa Arch, for example, when the sun is coming up, it sounds like machine guns going off. It's just like it's crazy, you know. But with film, you just don't have that ability.
Yeah, I recall watching, about the machine gun, I recall watching a video that a friend of mine made on a trip to Antarctica, and the dolphins were killer whales were jumping at the sides of the boats, and one of them was playing with a penguin, and they were just playing with it. They were going to eat it eventually, but they were playing with it, throwing it up in the air, and all you heard during this video, that was the same thing you heard, was that all the photographers on this Antarctica trip, all you could hear was every camera going 8 frames a second non-stop, waiting for this moment to happen. So that's very interesting.
So, Peyton, what is your view on the topic of film versus digital? Not versus, but the difference between them.
Well, like I said, my first experiences with an SLR type camera was while I was doing my undergrad research, and my supervisor at the time, basically I bought a similar camera to what he had, and was shooting some different types of slide film for use in research presentations and that sort of thing. And it was pretty pricey, especially being a poor undergrad student. It's kind of hard to justify taking a lot of shots and getting them developed and everything. And then, I've had more time and experience in the digital age, so much easier to take a lot of images and be able to kind of go through the worry about things like getting a couple images for dynamic range and be able to put those together. If the light's changing, or able to shoot multiple locations at once. I think I would have been very limited with film in my perception of things in landscape photography if I was starting out that way. So I think I'm a little bit, unfortunately, biased in that sense. I've only had the time to do it with digital, and no real challenge of shooting film and landscape work. So
yeah. Zach Stein in the chat has asked about if he could get some advice on a medium format system to get into. I know from my experience, you can buy some pretty good deals on some of the forums that have buy and sells, like for instance Fred Miranda, and there's other ones out there, of course eBay or Craigslist or something like that. But for myself, I mean, you can buy some pretty reasonable systems out there with Hasselblad, Bronica, Mamiya, things like that. So it would be a matter of keeping your eyes open for a decent system that would come up.
There's a lot of really good deals out there and stuff.
Yeah, I know. I've had my Hasselblad since 1996. I had one before that, but this is the most recent one that I've had. And I mean, back then it was a lot of money to buy into that system. You're spending $4,000 for one lens. So it was a pretty significant investment. And when I look on the buy and sell boards now, and you see them going for around $1,000 or even less sometimes, depending on the lens, it's not even worth it for me to sell my system. I would rather keep it, and have it for many years to come. So definitely some good deals out there if you're willing to get into medium format. And also there's still labs out there that are processing. Obviously, you can still buy the film. It's harder to find, but you find sources, and it's not really a big deal. It's certainly a different process for sure, because if you don't process your own, you have to send it out, and you have to wait maybe a week to get it back, and then scan it, that type of thing. So it's certainly a lot different than digital. There's no instant feedback for sure.
The whole part about waiting for your film to come back from the lab too. That's one of the other fun things about film.
Fun.
Because you it's fun because you don't quite know what you're going to get.
I gotta say, I'm like Athena, my ADD is off the scale, so there's no way.
No. Yeah, no.
It would give me fits.
Well, I always find there's a little bit of a surprise, because the picture that I thought was going to turn out usually is the one that doesn't turn out. Yeah. And also, when I get my film back from the lab, I usually look at it and I hate every photo I shot. And then you kind of wait, about an hour later, you're kind of like, oh, it's not that bad. Then, a couple of weeks go by, it's like, it's actually kind of good. And then a month goes later, it's my portfolio. It happens absolutely every time I come back from a trip, and I know to expect it, but I still hate my photos as soon as I see the transparencies. But I think when I get them on the computer, scan them in, I can kind of see a little better of what actually I'm dealing with.
I can completely relate to what you just said, because when I shot film, I remember that exact experience. I shot slide, and I would get my slides back, and the first go through, I would get depressed. This is terrible. And do you know why I think that happens? Because nothing compares to the real thing, and the real thing is so fresh in your mind that the film versions will never quite be the same.
Yeah.
But after that memory has faded a little, the film starts to look pretty good.
Yeah, and it's also a perception of kind of what you remember from the scene versus what you see on film.
Yeah.
And one way I've been kind of getting around that lately is I've been shooting a lot of color negative film, which you get a large range of tones, which is pretty nice. But you get the film back from the lab, and you still don't really know what it is until you actually put it on the scanner, and then you can kind of start working it a little bit. But that's actually, I always enjoy the process of waiting to get the film back from the lab. It sounds kind of weird, but it's that anticipation, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I remember those days. You come back from a 2-week trip, and you'd have like 75 rolls of 35 millimeter and 10 or 20 rolls of medium format, and you'd send it all in and get it back, and I'd get the light table out and spend hours going through them. It was just, sometimes it was tedious, but definitely something different about looking at these transparencies on the light table.
Yeah.
Different. So Ben, when you scan yours for printing, do you have that done commercially with a drum scanner?
Yeah, the actual files that get printed are drum scanned, but when I first get the film back, I go ahead and I put it on a flatbed just so I can. It's kind of like a digital loop in a way. I can zoom in on it, make sure everything's all good, but honestly, I don't even clean the glass on the scanner. So if you actually looked at the flatbed scans I do, they look pretty horrendous. That's why, size it for the web, it's all good. But if I want to print it like the ones behind me that have been printed, those are drum scanned. And I got a guy I use that does amazing scans, and that's when you actually see the true quality from the film. And I anticipate getting the DVD in the mail just the same as getting the film back from the lab, but this time I probably won't hate it as much.
Yeah. So what you were saying a second ago was what you get back as prints from the lab still doesn't reveal the data that you have on the negative. And so you have more data to work with once you've scanned that. It's a little closer to digital than we think.
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid workflow where start with the film capture, but then once you scan it in, you're all digital. But the drum scan will pull out about as much detail as you can see with your eye. So the deep shadows, the highlights. The tricky part is scanning color negative film, because much of that's left up to the interpretation of the person who's doing the scanning.
Yes.
But slide film is pretty straightforward to scan.
Yeah.
And I can actually pull a lot of tones out of the shadows and highlights, more than you might think from slide film. I just expose it a little bit on the bright side. I expose it as bright as I can, and then it's easy to scan that way, and I can kind of darken it back down.
Yeah.
So how much Gary Monroe in the chat asked how much post-processing you would do, Ben, with your drum scans for getting them prepared for printing?
If it's a transparency that's being scanned, not a heck of a lot. It's more so when you get the scan back from the drum scan guy, the shadows, he leaves them open a little bit, so the shadows aren't as dark as they really need to be, and the highlights, he leaves some detail in there as well. So it's kind of like doing an S-curve, maybe making up for some issues with the film itself. Maybe there was a color cast. But the way I always tell people is, the scans cost me about $200 each because I scan them huge. And if I'm spending $200 to scan a piece of film, it better be darn near perfect, basically, because I don't want to spend that much money on a scan only to realize that, it's still not printable. Color negative's a little bit different. That one you actually have to do a fair amount of work to kind of make it look like it did in real life, or whatever you want it to look like.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a minute here, and I want to try to invite Dave in, because I hear he's trying to get in. And if the Hangout drops, I'm going to have to re-invite everybody again.
Okay.
Hopefully it won't. Let me make sure I get his name right because it's not popping up like it normally does.
While Jim is doing that, there was another question. There's a couple of questions that they've been going by pretty quick. You're pretty popular with that large format camera, boy.
It's different. That's the whole thing.
Lisa's got a couple of really good questions. She says, how large are your drum scan files, and do you use lab color space to pull out info?
The files, I scan them to a 2 gigabyte file size. That's enough to print probably 60-something inches on the small side at 300 pixels per inch. The LightJet printer place I use, they can go 50 inches on the small side for paper, so it's scanned for the biggest print size.
Yeah.
As far as the editing, I don't really do anything in the lab mode. What I do is I just do kind of the normal editing. I've heard a lot of good stuff about editing in lab mode, but I really haven't found the need to do that. I've been able to get the results I want. They are scanned as a 16-bit file. I think that's right. And it's Adobe RGB color space. And even the shots that have a pretty fragile gradient, you can actually tweak them a fair amount, and the gradient stays nice and true. So they're actually really tweakable files if you need to.
Okay. Good. And one that we had skipped over that we didn't quite get to was Zach's question, or not Zach's, sorry, Larry's question. Larry Anderson was wondering, with large format film costing so much, do you need to depend on photo sales to support your work? And then, this can't really be a hobby, can it? So much effort to make a single shot.
I think it's kind of unrealistic to depend on print sales to support this until you have like this crazy huge name for yourself in galleries and all that, and that's kind of catch-22 of it. So I don't make enough money from print sales to support everything that I do, but I have a really long-term approach to it, and I figure it's all about kind of getting out there, making sure people can see the prints, and maybe eventually. But as we all know, with landscape photography, the modern business model isn't so much selling prints. It's it's about the information. It's about the the blog, the workshops, and all that. So I would love to be able to sell enough prints to make it work. But here's the other thing: I don't, even though it sounds a lot, $20 a shot, $200 for a scan. I also don't shoot a lot. So I actually spend far less now than I did when I was shooting digital, and even when I was upgrading cameras every 4 or 5 years, whatever. I do spend a lot less now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a break from this Hangout because I want to get Dave in here. For some reason, I can't do a re-invite within this Hangout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close down this Hangout. So everybody that's watching live, just stay tuned for another Hangout to open up. And hopefully we can get Dave in. Hopefully Dave's listening so he knows what's going on. And first of all, what I'll do is I'll just close this down and then re-invite everybody back in. Okay, so if everybody can just stay tuned, and you'll get a re-invite. All right?
Okay.
Good. Mm-hmm.